Hello and welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. And today we are talking about Booster Gold. That's right. So the question is that show gonna go into production soon? There were rumors out there that it's gonna go into production as early as July, and we've had some, leaks, supposed leaks coming out talking about the fact that they've already got their man. They know who Booster Gold is going to be. So, you gotta wonder, like, is it gonna be somebody like a Glen Powell? I know we talked about Chris Pratt last time. We did a fan casting. We went through a number of other options, but it's worth talking about, of course. And it looks like the show is on the verge of finding a showrunner, which would be the head writer and the person who really gives the show's vision. And we have lots to get through on the Superman side of things as well. There's some updates there with that movie, and James Gunn has been talking about how it's just about halfway done filming, and you've got more and more casting news coming out still, which is weird to think about considering the movie's halfway done filming. But anyway, we'll get into that and so much more. And to do that, of course, as always, I've got John with me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Got a lot of news to get through, so let's try to get through it as fast as we can. Well, not too fast, so people can react and comment and all that fun stuff. So, first things first is obviously the big booster gold news. There was two major bits of news. Well, okay, well, it's kind of you know, okay. Anyway, sorry, I'm just kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself, but there was the initial news. This happened like a month or so back where they were like, oh, yeah, Booster Gold is going to start filming in July. I think it was like July 8th or something like that. I saw that. I'm like, that's bullshit. I'm like, that's way too quick. And this was like, Supergirl had not been announced yet, but even then I was like, okay, they have Creature Commandos in production. They have Peacemaker soon to be in production or in production. It's kind of like a weird timeline. And Superman. No way would they bring in something else, too. I mean, they're working on their 2024 release and both of their 2025 releases. Why would they add this? This makes no sense. Well, James Gunn flies in like the DC Messiah he is, I guess, now. And was like, nope, nope, that's BS. None of that. The production isn't imminent. It's fake, it's false, it's bullshit. And yeah, that was pretty obvious. Like, obviously, there's some wish fulfillment because the only Booster Gold we've gotten in live action was a guy named Mike, played by Donald Faison, in the last season of Legends of Tomorrow as a last
Right.
ditch effort to not get canceled. So that's the only Booster Gold in. Oh, no, sorry. I'm sorry. We got Smallville. I'm so sorry for all you Smallville
I
fans.
mean, there was also that. Wasn't there a show that got like there was a show that was ordered to series back in 2013, like Andrew
Yeah,
Kreisberg and
there
Greg
was
Berlanti
gonna
were
be one on
attached.
Sci-Fi, but we never got like
Yeah,
somebody who actually appeared on screen. So we got the guy in
right.
Smallville. Sorry, brain fart. I never watched the show, so that always kind of
Yeah,
that's a little bit out of my horizons a little bit. And then we got the Phase-On version on Legends of Tomorrow, who he was pretty much Booster Gold. They confirmed it was Booster Gold. They just couldn't say it was Booster Gold because probably there was rights issues. Anyway,
yeah.
so those are the only ones I believe we've gotten in terms of live action. So we want to see this character like done proper, done right, and people are excited because getting his own show. Like in terms of all the other shows, we've gotten like Amanda Waller. We've gotten not just the Viola Davis version in a bunch of movies, but we did get Angela Bassett's version in Green Lantern. Speaking of Green Lantern, we have gotten multiple live action Green Lanterns. We got the one from the god awful Justice League of America pilot back in the 90s, and then we got the god awful Ryan Reynolds version. Well, I wouldn't say god awful. It's not terrible, but it's not good either. But like in terms of all these characters, I feel like that they've gotten like justice in some way, lack of a better word. So we just want to see Booster Gold. So I get why people were excited, but not the case. But in terms of another rumor mill, what we've gotten could again get that giant salt lick out for our gigantic grain of salt.
Right,
Don't
yeah.
take this as gospel, obviously,
Mhm.
but there have been reports, as you mentioned before, that we have our man. We have our Booster Gold. We just don't know him yet. And then they're also apparently looking for a showrunner. Now, this I'd be more likely to believe because I remember somebody commented when we did our slate how, oh, they announced, like, I remember somebody said, oh, they announced that the Authority has an outline and has a writer. We just don't
Right.
know them. So I would say James Gunn's a pretty smart guy. He doesn't
Yeah.
want to blow his load. He doesn't want to reveal every piece of information, all that jazz. So with all that, he probably has a lot of people like behind the scenes doing their shit. Yeah, we know about some, like, for instance, obviously we know Superman Legacy is filming. Like, we had the director for Supergirl that was probably confirmed way before that article was released a couple weeks back. We have James Mangold. I mean, we have so much, and we probably have even more. It's just now we're kind of, I believe it was Daniel RPK is the one who
Right.
released the
Yeah,
rumor.
Daniel
This
Rickman, who's
yes.
I mean, he's a known
Um,
scooper within in the industry these days. He doesn't I
yeah,
don't think he has a 100% track record, but
yeah,
it's when he says something, it's you at least ought to take a bit of notice. And
right,
that's not to say again that, this is true.
right, right, right.
And it's a very, it's a small nugget there, and it's very vague, I guess, or maybe purposefully vague, because yeah, they're close to getting a showrunner. I could say that. I mean, that close could mean they take another year. Close could mean tomorrow, like anywhere in
Exactly.
between. And as far as the titular character already being cast, the original rumor for that had to do with the idea that we were going to get that into production in July, which was according to a date that was listed on production list, which isn't necessarily like the most reliable place to find this information. It's kind of like going on IMDb and trying to find information on who's attached to what project,
Mhm.
before it starts filming. It's not like this is publicly editable, like IMDb is, but at the same time, these details are not always going to be correct. And like you
Right,
mentioned, it just doesn't make sense that they'll be shooting all that stuff at the
right.
same time. I mean, like, just logically thinking about it, where would Booster Gold slot in to the fray in terms of like the release? And if it's a TV show, then if you're filming this year, that means you're releasing it next year. But is that even something they're going to do? Plus, when you look at all the DC properties Studios has under their umbrella, that includes all the Elseworld stuff. So not only are they working on the DC Studios stuff, they're working on the Batman, they're working on, any of those spin-offs like the Penguin, the other spin-off that's
Mhm.
supposedly still in development. There's the other GCPD show that's DCU based that Matt Reeves has in development, and you still have Joker Folie à Deux that's gonna, probably still doing some post-production work. So there's a lot of resources out there already committed to projects that we know about. So yeah, it would be surprising, because we were speculating that if since Supergirl is slated for 2026, chances are the earliest it goes into production is towards the end of this year, if not maybe early next year. So they have enough time to kind of turn everything around, shoot the movie, take it through post production for summer 2026. But like you said, it would be a lot to take on. Not that it's impossible. It's not
Yeah,
impossible.
it's
I
not,
mean,
I mean, it's
it's
pretty
but
separate. It just feels a little bit weird that they're working on their film, I believe, filming Peacemaker right now, and
yeah.
then they're also working on Waller. And James Gunn did state that Waller is going to be after Peacemaker because he did confirm that there was obviously there was a lot of rocking with the strikes and whatnot, and that delayed some stuff. And with, I assume, actor contracts, writing contracts, everything got thrown away. So
Right.
Waller was supposed to come out before Peacemaker, but then due to the strikes, now Peacemaker is coming out before Waller. So it's pretty much confirmed that Peacemaker is obviously, it's filming now, so it's going to come out in 2025. But at the same time, with Waller, like I believe Jeremy Carver and Crystal Henry, I believe her name is, um, and I think one other writer are working on Waller right now. And so on just writing it. And so that would mean it's most likely going to start filming maybe in 2025 with a 2026 release, or they might do Peacemaker in early 2025 and then do Waller in late 2025, because technically they already have their titular star, and she's gonna, as we said a couple days ago, that Viola Davis is going to show up in Creature Commandos as Amanda
Right.
Waller. So they already pretty much have her, and I assume she's under contract. So that's again, I'm just trying to think like logistically, and as you said, where would the fuck would Booster Gold be in there? So it's obvious, like, and as you said, close can mean a billion different things. Close could mean in 2 minutes, but also in this industry, close could mean 10 years from now. Like that's
I mean,
it's
look, if you're realistically speaking, let's give this person the benefit of the doubt, right?
yeah.
Daniel or RPK, he tends to get things right more often than not. But with that said, the assumption here could be that they're in negotiations with a
Yeah.
showrunner,
Okay.
potentially. That those negotiations could fall through. It's not confirmed.
Yep.
Or it could be that the deal has already been signed. But usually, what happens is with a lot of these deals, it doesn't leak until well after the fact. So, like, they might have a deal signed and ready to go a month ago, and we may be breaking the news. Like, somebody might break the news 2 months later, and then once all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, that's when like James Gunn or whoever's going to officially announce it will address it. It's similar to what this post that this question from the fan was asked. The James Gunn originally posted about Ma and Pa Kent and officially confirming who are being cast to play the characters in the movie, and we have known about it for weeks because it was kind of broke on online by other news
Hmm.
outlets, but it was only just officially confirmed 6 days ago by James Gunn. And this was the post where somebody was asking the question about Booster Gold, where he basically debunked that rumor. So that right there is an example of a situation where the deal was probably in place way before then the news broke, and then once everything was absolutely confirmed and all the legal aspects of it were done, only then did James Gunn decide to make it official in a more official capacity. And so there's a timeline to these things. But all
Hmm.
that to say, I mean, people love to ship Glen Powell and Booster Gold like
Yeah.
as a great pairing.
As you
I know
pointed out on the thumbnail.
I did. I think it could be a good fit potentially. Like I mean,
Yeah.
we were talking about Chris Pratt before we did a fan casting. You look at the character, you look at Glen Powell, you look at the stardom that he has, you look at the idea that these characters are not always just going to live on the small screen. The chances are that a Booster Gold gets introduced in a TV series, which by the way will be a Max TV series that will likely be on HBO Max, whatever.
Hmm.
Like it's a premium property. It's not just a TV series on cable television.
Right.
So it's not uncommon to see big A-listers like Nicole Kidman or Amy Adams take part in HBO shows. Like we see it all the time. So I wouldn't be surprised that I guess my thing is his star power wouldn't be a reason for him to not take on the role of Booster Gold. You could also look at Booster Gold as a character that, while in the comics was not traditionally known as somebody who was super high profile, um, we could see a situation where in the movies, all of a sudden he becomes like an A-lister because he's being played by an A-lister and because the character takes on a
Yeah.
bigger like presence in the cultural zeitgeist. Kind of like Iron Man, right? Iron Man was never really known as a big superhero until Robert Downey Jr. Takes on the role, and John Favreau and his team put together a fantastic movie, launched the whole MCU, and all of a sudden now Iron Man is probably the most, if certainly one of the most well-known Marvel heroes out there. and you go back 20 odd years and people wouldn't really be able to say that. They would be like, oh,
outside of
Wolverine,
like outside of like
X-Men.
diehard comic book fans,
Yeah,
but like
yeah. Like most people will be like Hulk, like, or even Captain America wasn't
Spider-Man.
that big.
Yeah.
Spider-Man, I mean, Spider-Man was, I think still Spider-Man is probably the most popular, but Iron Man has like kind of ascended into
Yeah.
that top three, top five, which
Oh
you
yeah.
would not have imagined to be the case 20 years ago.
No.
And right now, I can see that potential for a character like Booster Gold, especially because it's not just the power set, because the power set for Booster Gold is not quite all that unique necessarily, nothing like out
No,
of the
he literally
ordinary.
stole his shit. Like that was like the
So
kind of joke. Like he
it's
went back in
it's
time to make money. That was like
right.
the big thing. It just
Yeah. It's
I
it's
think that
more the character behind the
it's
mask that I think will
yeah. And
attract
I think
people's attention.
and he's literally known as the hero that's never remembered. Like that's like a
Right.
running gag in the comics that
Yeah.
nobody remembers. Like there was that famous scene, I think it was in Justice League Unlimited, where it's like, "Hey, can I have your autograph?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, buddy." And then he signs it and he's like, "Oh, I
Right.
thought you were Green Lantern." And then he walks away. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
first off, he's not green. Why the fuck did you think he was green, you stupid
Maybe he's
kid?
a yellow
Anyway,
lantern.
and
Yeah.
then but yeah, that's like the whole like in joke. So it's kind of funny
Yeah.
how it like works that he's not an A-lister. But it would be even funnier if the hero that's never remembered then
Right.
becomes an A-lister. And I just think I think Glen Powell would be pushing it because he's really good at playing douchebags. And the
Mhm.
problem I feel like with Booster Gold in this day and age, and I think unfortunately what they kind of did with him in New 52, I believe, is they made him a dick. And the thing is, Booster Gold isn't really that much of an asshole. He's like maybe a little like pompous and kind of not pompous, but like kind of egotistical, maybe a little bit
Right.
like narcissistic, but he's not an asshole. And I feel like that a lot of the incarnations nowadays they paint him like an asshole. Like he was just a guy, he's like he wanted fame and fortune. Like that was the thing. He was, you know, he went back in time, wanted fame and fortune, but now he like oh, he bet on his like high school football games. Oh, he had like a dirt bag father and he like treated him like shit. It was like a whole thing. And I feel like Glen Powell might be a bit much for that. I mean, I could see him because he's a really popular name right now, and I could
Right.
kind of see it working, but he would have to majorly downplay that because I want to see a Booster Gold that's like maybe a little full of himself, but I don't want to see Booster Gold who's an asshole. That's the thing. I don't want to see and considering the fact that James Gunn is a huge fan of that original JLI run,
Right.
um I feel like he's going to try and steer clear from that. Well, whoever showrunner he does pick. And with that, I think there's a lot of really good showrunners. I think Jody Hill could probably be a really good showrunner. There was rumors that he would direct a lot of the episodes of Booster Gold, and he directed a lot of episodes, or he or she or they directed a lot of episodes for Peacemaker. And so I think they would probably be a good pick to like, boost them up,
Yeah.
pun intended.
I see what you did
Um
there. Yeah.
so they could probably do it. I would like to see like more like comedy writers. Like I feel like
Yeah.
Phil Lord and Chris Miller could do it, although because I mean they're not really huge in like
That would be one hell of a
Spider-Verse
coup.
because they
I
have
mean,
worked on TV. I don't think they were the
right.
showrunners, but they did do uh they were executive producers on Last Man on Earth, and that was a pretty decent show, and that was like more comedy driven. I think they could do something like that, like someone like that, maybe like depending on when like it gets released, maybe the Duffer Brothers. I could see the Duffer Brothers also
Yeah.
working on Booster Gold as well. But I could see a lot of people like that, but someone who can like handle like a good balance, mainly comedy, but someone like that. I would like to I think there's a lot of possibilities for showrunners. It's probably someone we've never heard of, same with the actor. He's probably like a C or D lister. It's not going to be Glen Powell. I don't think it's going to be Chris Pratt. Now, in terms of the other guys I chose, I could see Billy Magnuson doing it, and that's not just me being a stand for him for Booster Gold. I just think he's not like a huge mega star. Like the biggest thing he did was like the Aladdin live action remake, and even then he was like a supporting character, not even. So I think he could probably do it. Sean William Scott could probably do it. He's not a huge star. Jerry Trainer, I'd love to see. I think he could probably do it. He's just kind of doing Nickelodeon shit right now. I mean, he's doing the iCarly reboot or whatever,
Well, but
so
the,
maybe
I
he's
mean, my question
not
would
doing
be
that.
like if they're gonna pair him up like in the animated series and in the comics with a Blue Beetle, then
Yeah.
you probably want to. I'm not saying he has to be the same age as Sholo Mariduena, but you probably like how does that chemistry work? Like it's got I don't I'm just saying that
Well,
that's where you know.
considering that he's more attributed to Ted Cord, they'll probably have
Oh,
Ted Cord and Jaime Reyes because that
okay,
just I feel because they
yeah,
I know what they did. I remember in Smallville, like one of the few things I remember about like the whole Booster Gold thing is
yeah,
that Ted Cord I think did exist in Smallville, but I think he died and then Booster Gold, who was friends with Ted Cord, took Jaime under his wing, essentially. So they might do that. Like if they don't want to like introduce Ted Cord immediately, they want to like build up to like, oh, Ted Cord. They might have
right,
like an older Booster Gold, not too old, maybe like early mid 30s, take Jaime under his wing, like, hey, I remember, your namesake. He was my he was my best friend. I'll like help you out. Like that I could see like
right.
more of a mentorship
I
rather
see what you
than
mean.
like a partnership. I think that would work the best.
Yeah,
Because it seems too obvious to introduce
yeah,
Jaime into Booster Gold since his namesake is the best friend of Booster Gold. So it just makes too much sense. They gotta include him in there. So
right.
um but yeah, I think I'm just excited for the show. I just, as I said before, like this is a character that many have wanted to see, and I think he deserves his time to shine. And yeah, I think Booster Gold is ripe for a lot of like different things. Like I just think it could be a really good action comedy whenever it does come out. I hope it's soon. I don't think July 8th soon, but I hope it's soon.
Well,
So
I mean, not coming out, but like going into production.
yeah.
I gotta imagine that it's not. It's look. It's possible. It is possible that they're just publicly denying it because things aren't quite official, and that's still the plan. But it's also possible that July 8th might have been the original date they planned on putting. Like that was the track they were on,
Hmm.
but because of the strikes, things got delayed. Because if you do
Maybe, yeah.
remember back when the strikes ended, James Gunn kind of made this big post about how he was so thankful that, because of the work they had done prior to the strike, and then some of the work they were able to continue doing during the strike without crossing any picket lines, um, Superman was able to keep its original release date. But that doesn't mean the other projects were as lucky, and especially because a lot of the other projects weren't as far along. Of course, we know Peacemaker season 2 is in production already, and Waller as well is about to go into production, or it's somewhere along the way, because you have a lot of crossover between the production teams and the cast members. So it just makes sense from a from a producing standpoint, from a
Hmm.
logistics standpoint. But Booster Gold will be something completely different and new and separate from that, like where James Gunn will just be involved as a producer, and everything else is sort of its own like world. Kind of like Supergirl, where we saw that they had been working on packaging that together for a while. You cast Supergirl, you bring in the director. You of course already had a script that they loved for a while,
Hmm.
and now we know that it's got a release date. I think James Gunn has made it pretty clear that nothing is gonna get a release date or go into production until they have a script that they love, and therefore my question would be like, are the scripts ready? Is that where they're at right now, where they have a producing team and a writing team that's sort of working on that aspect of it? Which, if they are, then that would lead me to believe there's a showrunner attached, because a showrunner is the head of that team. um, but while Booster Gold, we don't quite know where it stands. We know it's in development. We don't know who is going to be cast as Booster Gold. I personally still think that Glen Powell would be a good choice. But he's also got a very busy slate for himself. He's got Twisters coming out this summer, and he's recently moved back to his hometown. He's going to continue and finish his education, get a degree, and he's He's still got Top Gun, the Maverick, Top Gun Maverick sequel, like the third Top Gun movie that's on the deck for who knows when. But he's got projects lined up, and he's gonna be a busy guy. Like, can he commit to a superhero franchise on top of everything else he's doing? That's something difficult to pinpoint unless, of course, we see the news that he's going to be cast in there. Chris Pratt, on the other hand, of course, he still has a lot of things going on, and he will be coming back as Star-Lord in at least one, if not
Yeah, there's
multiple,
also
future
that
Avengers
too.
movies. And even though he's been teasing let's do both, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to come in and play a significant character. Like Nathan Fillion, for example, playing the Guy Gardner version of Green Lantern, probably means he's got a smaller role in the Superman movie, and then he's going to weave in and out of like the other shows. And I mean, speaking of lanterns, there was an update. It's a
Yes.
little sketchy, and it does also tie into our talk about showrunners and writing team. But it looks like if
Yep.
you go by the WGA profiles that recently been updated for a lot of the writers who were in the writers room for that show, we kind of have an idea now who's working under Chris Mundy for that show. Of course, Chris Mundy's been confirmed as the showrunner for that, and he's brought in other executive producers, or rather, other executive producers have been brought in to team up with him, and we have got some news about the writers. So, what can you tell us about that project? Um, and do we have any more updates regarding like the timeline for Lanterns, or is it also just still
Yeah.
we know the people involved, but we don't really know when it goes into production?
Yeah, it's kind of like what I feel like. I know, based on James Gunn's original announcement, it seems like this was like the slate he announced was like for the next like five
Yeah,
years. That's what we like in terms of timeline. That seemed like the most likely because he said it's like part one of chapter one. Like there's more of chapter
right.
one. So what it seems like, I feel like this, if this is true, again, get our giant salt lick out, our grain of salt, our gigantic grain of salt that we have to say, because then people take this as gospel. It's not. This is just rumor mill. This is not even close to being a credited source. So we're just talking about like, hey, maybe this is it. So Chris Mundy was pretty much, it wasn't confirmed by anybody like James Gunn or Peter Safran. However, it just seems like it's been pretty much unofficially confirmed that Chris Mundy is the showrunner. And then it was released a couple months later that unfortunately Damon Lindelof is also part of the crew as producer. Um, because for some reason people really liked his Watchmen show, even though it was
I-
garbage. But
it yeah, it had its fans.
unfortunately, but then the next guy I wanted that they have in the article is Justin Britt Gibson, who wrote for Counterpart. I watched the first few episodes of that. Really great. It was one of those shows that shouldn't have ended as it
I
did.
think that got unfairly canceled, right?
Yeah,
Like it didn't really
pretty
last
much.
very long.
I watched the first few episodes. I
Yeah,
thought it was really good, but then of course my,
yeah.
my wily short attention span brain kind of goes to a million different things at once. So I kind of was like, okay, I'll go back to this, but then I'll do this, and then it got canceled, and then I didn't really have a desire to. It's like, oh, I hate it when things end on a cliffhanger. But for what I did watch, that's not this guy's fault. Like, it's not his fault. It's not his fault. He wrote a great show and nobody watched it, and then it went to the shitter. But he wrote for Counterpart, and then I've heard Into the Badlands is really good. Like I think like the last few seasons were like kind of but I remember it was like it had a really
Yeah,
strong start and it had a really good following.
did.
So that's exciting as well. So that's good. Then apparently one of the writers for the Penguin, Brianna Gibson, is might be attached to write, which is good because she has some DC experience already.
Oh yeah,
And
I mean she's actively involved. She's got to be like even now. I mean, I don't know how involved they are at this point of the process, but she's in the House of DC,
yeah,
so it's good
so that's
to
exciting.
know. Yeah,
The only one I'm a little iffy about is Vanessa Baden Kelly, who she was a story editor on The Sex Lives of College Girls, which I don't know how that like fits with a cosmic story about an intergalactic police force. But hey, if she's a great writer, then we're like, okay, well, we see what you can do here. What about something that's totally different? Maybe she's a secret like Green Lantern nerd. I don't know, but
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't, just because she hasn't worked on anything that's
right.
in the same
Who knows?
genre doesn't necessarily mean she has doesn't. I mean, she's being hired because she's talented and has
Yeah.
the chops, and that series on Max is really popular. It's actually a, pretty good show too. If I think I've watched a few episodes, and I think it's been on for a couple of seasons as well. Like, it's been around, and it definitely draws in an audience. And it's not the
Mm-hmm.
same thing as Lanterns, of course, but if she's coming in as a story editor or executive story, she was an executive story editor on that other show. Whether she's a writer or story editor, a writer's room is an opportunity for writers to take on different roles. Like, if you come in as a junior writer, you might just be doing very small things like, quality control stuff, like, helping out with scenes and some character arcs. But, you can eventually end up doing more things like writing full episodes. And for a show like this, we don't know how many episodes Lantern's going to have. So for usually nowadays, the pattern is for streaming shows that the showrunner generally ends up writing a lot of the episodes, and then a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the other members of the writers' rooms get credits for, like, making contributions. But we don't know how this team is going to be particularly organized. In most cases, we don't know that because as people who are watching the show, I mean, it's kind of not our, not for us to really care about. Most people don't care who wrote the particular episode, who wrote the dialogue in that episode, who edited that script. But this is the news. We know that these are some of the names attached. Some of these names we have seen before. Some of these are new, but it looks like they've got a very diverse set of writers attached, and the show is going to be bringing some of the most, fantastic and underutilized characters in all of comics, not just DC Comics, all of comics, finally to life in live action, because this Green Lantern show has been on the table for like what, 10 plus years? It seems like,
Probably, yeah.
all the way back to, what was that, 20, I think it was 2014, the Comic-Con presentation, right? The big Warner Brothers DCEU slate that was announced. Then that was the first time we heard there was going to be a Green Lantern Corps movie, and then it took different shapes and forms, and then it became a TV show which was going to
Yeah.
feature some of the lesser known lanterns. They even cast some actors, and then they completely, like, cleaned house and said, we're starting all over, and now this is going to be part of the new DCU, and now it's going to feature the two most popular lanterns in Hal Jordan and John Stewart, and it's going to have a whole new team and a whole new vision. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see, because these characters come to life on screen. Because how is it, like, it just still blows my mind, how is it that it's been almost a decade and a half and we've only had that one iteration of Green Lantern live action in Ryan Reynolds version?
Because
Like,
life isn't fair.
how, I mean, why has Warner Brothers let that, like, sit for that long? I mean, I know, I'm just asking the question as an outsider. You could wonder, like, why are they giving Ryan Reynolds constant opportunities to slander the the Green Lantern character? Even though I think some of it he means in jest at this point, and I think he definitely looks back at that fondly, certainly for the fact that, him and Blake Lively found each other, and they're, like,
Yeah.
one of the
I'm like,
best couples in
how
Hollywood
can you
today,
hate this movie
through
so
that
much
project.
if you met the
So
woman who bared your children on this fucking
it's
movie? Like,
that's,
I
yeah,
don't know how much you can hate that. Like, really? I mean,
yeah,
sure, Ben Affleck can now properly hate Daredevil because him and Jennifer Garner are broken up. So,
yeah. Well, but just to kind of, like, circle back to
the
the Booster
original,
Gold
yeah,
the original headline of this episode, we don't have confirmation yet as to who exactly is playing Booster Gold. A lot of people online want to have that be Glen Powell. I think we have pitched some ideas in our fan casting episode from a few weeks ago, where we were talking about, Glen Powell as one of the options. You mentioned Billy Magnuson, of course, as well as even Jerry Trainer from
yeah.
iCarly and Drake and Josh, as well as, of course, Chris Pratt. The question becomes, who is it going to be? We know that this is going to be a character that will be introduced in a TV show, but likely to migrate into the movies. So it doesn't need to be just a TV actor. They could get an A-lister. We talked about the idea that if Glen Powell does come into the role, he could take this character from being a B, C, D-list character in the DC comics to being an A-lister, somebody who you associate as a top 5, even maybe a member of the Justice League, one day character, kind of like what happened with Iron Man and RDJ. So if you were joining us late on the show, then that's kind of where we started. You're welcome to kind of like rewind back and look at that. But ultimately, I still think that Glen Powell would be a pretty good choice. I mean, when you look at the choices they've made already with casting, it's a mix of well-known actors like Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, but then you've got David Cornswell playing Superman, and of course, you've got a nice mix there across the whole cast of that show or movie, and then even for Supergirl, like we've so far we've got a rising star in that role, and Booster Gold could be if you're going for the older character and gonna pair him up with Ted Kord's version of Blue Beetle, then you can
Right.
probably cast a Glen Powell and Chris Pratt, and it would make sense. I think Glen Powell can still play somebody who you put him opposite Joe Maridueña's Blue Beetle, and it would work. And I bet you that would be an instant hit. Like people forget, Peacemaker, the last show that DC did on Max, was the biggest show in the world when it was on air, like bar none. So it's very possible that they do this, and a show like Booster Gold just captures the imagination. Like so don't think of it as something small just because it's a streaming service TV show rather than a movie, because it's absolutely possible this character can blow up and then end up in their own trilogy of films. And I think that's where casting a Glen Powell would be perfect. We don't have confirmation yet. According to Daniel RPK, the character's already been cast. Who that is, I guess Daniel has not chosen not to reveal that, or maybe
Or
he doesn't
doesn't
even
know, he
know.
just knows the reports of like,
So
oh, it got
yeah,
cast, and oh, they're looking for a showrunner, and that's it.
yeah. I mean, we'll see how that changes.
Yep.
Hopefully we'll get confirmation soon. We know James Gunn already debunked the idea that the show is going to go in production on July 8th, so we know that's not happening. He did that on Instagram, so I'll put that up again that we were talking about earlier. In regards to a fan question when he was confirming the casting of Superman's parents in the new movie, one of the fans asked him about whether after Peacemakers 2 we're going to get Amanda Waller series, or Booster Gold is that going to go into production on July 8th, because there was an article out there talking about a website, an industry trade website, mentioning that was the date of start of production for Booster Gold was July 8th. James Gunn said it's false. We're still working on it, but that date is not set. Because if you really think about it, John, like if July 8th was the date, we're already basically at the end of May. So that gives them what, 6 weeks, barely, to like get everything together. I mean, this close to a TV show going into production, you've got sets being built, you've done your costume tests, you've got your cast in place, you've definitely got the writers' room in place, and we really haven't gotten any of that information. And we know that Hollywood leaks like a sieve. So certainly with DC news, even under James Gunn, where sometimes it could be a barren landscape, we still get a lot of this news coming out from trade sources like Deadline or Hollywood Reporter before James Gunn makes it official once all the contracts have been signed. But we haven't really heard anything like that. So yeah. Any other thoughts from you, John? Like, do you have a favorite for Booster Gold? Like, I think Glen Powell would be perfect,
Yeah.
because it's a character that he can really elevate, and he's a rising star in Hollywood. So, and it would kind of fit the profile perfectly for me. Who would your pick be?
I think, I mean, I have said Billy Magnuson has always been my favorite for a while. I just think he encapsulates the character. He would just be perfect, and I've said he was. It seems like he was born to play that role. Like most definitely, he's just got the charisma. He's got the face. He's got the haircut. He's got the bod. He's got the acting ability. He's got a good filmography that's not like A-lister, but it's like good enough that he could like sustain something. Like he's done TV, he's done movies, he's done a little bit of everything, and he usually shines. Like for anybody who wants, the vibe of who his booster will be, I'd say watch Game Night. Game Night is a great Like it's not like the greatest comedy ever, but it's one of those
Yeah.
things where it's like it's just so funny and like it just consistently makes you laugh. And I remember I watched that with friends of mine in the theater, and we were like, oh, we were just roaring with laughter. It was just so silly and so funny, and I think he could definitely do it. Like, oh my god, that scene. Wait, hold on, go back. This scene, oh my god, it was one of those like scenes that shouldn't work but does. I can't explain it. I won't spoil it for you, but that scene in Game Night was so fucking funny, and he had really good chemistry with this actress. I don't know the actress's name, but like they had really good chemistry with one another. And this was just so funny. Sharon
Yeah,
Horgan,
Sharon
yeah,
Horgan. Yeah. Yeah, well, with that said, I mean, hey, look, it's hopefully we get some news on this soon. We just wanted to address some of the rumors out there. Huge grains of
yeah,
salt. Nothing is official. James Gunn already denied the fact that we're not going into production on Booster Gold on July 8th. That will still probably happen at some point down the road. It
mm-hmm,
just depends on when they have the scripts that they need. In order to have the scripts that you need a showrunner, and you need to then put a team behind that showrunner, and then he or she or they will have to then do their due diligence with all the scripts
mm-hmm,
and stories that they want to tell. And somewhere along the way you cast your characters, and I personally think Glen Powell would be perfect. And John, of course, you've got Billy Magnuson in mind. Those are two really good picks, and I don't think they would
mm-hmm.
go wrong with either of them. But until next time, guys, I mean, it's been another week at DCU Daily. We'll be back next week with more episodes and more news and updates. If there's any breaking news from James Gunn, we will definitely talk about that as always. But until next week, go out there, watch something DC related, and come back to us and talk to us about it. We would love to hear from you. As always, hit the like and subscribe button, as we usually like to say. That definitely helps us out, and especially if you've been watching us on a regular basis, then by hitting the subscribe button will make sure that you get all the updates when we go live and have a new video going up. And of course, if you hit the like button, that gets us into the YouTube algorithm and in favor with the algorithm gods, if you will. So John, we'll see you. I'll see you. We'll see the folks watching next week on DCU Daily with more news. Until then, have a good weekend, and we'll see you here next time on DC Daily.